Naomi, on to you. Perhaps again, you'd be so gracious as to remind the audience why you're here today and how why you're the perfect person for answering some of these questions.
Sure, Kate. So my name is Naomi Rosenthal. I work with South Pole Group as a key account manager for the consumer goods and extractives industry. I also work very closely with the water team, and I help to develop a strategy for South Pole Group on how to work in water more closely. And of course, a key part of what we're doing right now around water in South Pole is our work with CDP, where we're scoring all of the companies aside from the Japanese and Korean companies for the 2015 disclosure cycle. And I'm honored to be here and give some insights about the statistics that we found, and also some steps forward for some of the disclosing companies, and also some companies that maybe either chose or not to disclose or didn't have the opportunity to disclose this year.
Great, thank you. Speaking of scoring, we have our 8 leaders, which is great, but as you rightly pointed out, it's not enough. Within 2 hours, I think every company that we've scored will receive their score and a benchmarking report that will enable them to understand the strengths and weaknesses of their responses. These scores and benchmarking reports will also be shared with all of our investor signatories. What advice would you give to those companies that are unfortunately not on our leadership list just yet?
So I would give the same advice, maybe even also to the leaders, because there's always room for improvement. But I think a main feature of the scoring is that all companies will also be receiving a score feedback chart. That chart gives all kinds of details on some of the strengths and weaknesses that the company has at the moment related to their water disclosure. So I think that's a great place for companies who have disclosed to start and reflect on their current water management and understand how they might take that further. Another offering that we have is the score feedback call. So for companies who maybe have additional questions, who don't understand some aspect of their score, or who would like to better understand how they might be able to improve in the future and what kinds of strategic direction they can take, we have the opportunity to have a call with them and give them some more detailed feedback on that. I'd also encourage companies to download some of the data from their peers. I think being able to benchmark across a specific industry or geography can be very insightful and helpful, and help companies to understand and learn from their peers on how they might be able to improve. Much of the data is available publicly online on the CDP website, but for a deeper dive, South Pole is also available to give a more concrete and more in-depth benchmarking and feedback process for companies. For those companies who have, already maybe relatively progressive and advanced corporate water stewardship, I would encourage them to move more towards collective action and holistic integration of corporate water stewardship throughout their line of operations.
You mentioned, Naomi, about the companies that have not disclosed this year. I think the number was around 668 of the companies that we engaged failed to provide the information that we were hoping for. That represents a significant opportunity again for bringing more companies into this conversation. Is there any advice that you would give to those companies?
I would strongly encourage companies to complete this disclosure. I think from what we see with companies that are disclosing, they're getting an immense amount of value out of that. So they're better understanding how their companies are going to be engaging with these risks in the future. And the process of doing the disclosure can be really insightful because it can also raise different opportunities. I know that companies have a wide range of reasons why they do not participate or why they decline to disclose. In some cases, there might be concerns around what could be revealed. I think it's important to have an open conversation about that, and I know that CDP is available for that at South Pole as well. But for those companies who maybe want to better understand what the disclosure entails, I would be happy to speak with them as well and give them some insights on what that looks like for them.
Great, thank you, Naomi. Yes, I guess it's worth noting, certainly for those companies that haven't responded yet, it is possible to respond in a private way so that your disclosure is shared only with your investor signatories and it's not posted on our website. That may give you a little bit more confidence and comfort to provide the information that is being sought by your key stakeholders, of course. Naomi, you mentioned about collective action earlier, and I spoke about how the concept of corporate water stewardship is still relatively new for many and is obviously still evolving. We are seeing an awful lot of companies focusing on operational approaches to managing their water risk. So what I mean by that is that they know where their water meters are, they might know where their wastewater treatment plants are, but they don't necessarily understand the vulnerabilities of the source that they're relying upon. They're not yet aware of who else might be relying on that resource, for example, within the river basins that they're operating in. So while that is a good first step, it's not the end of the road, I feel. Perhaps you could reflect on that a little?
Certainly. I think you're absolutely right. The operational approach to water management is an excellent first step. But unfortunately, particularly in light of the way that the global water crisis looks right now, it's absolutely not enough. The types of challenges that companies are facing at the moment are completely unprecedented, and the cumulative effect of climate change, increased water use, conflicting water use, and less secure supply really means that companies need to take a more proactive approach in understanding how their own business operations are interacting with the water basin that they're operating in, and at the same time, so going in both directions, how they are influencing the water basin and how the water basin is influencing their own management practices. So that really means going beyond the fence line. It means looking beyond the immediate area of operation and better understanding that interaction.
Thank you, Naomi. Again, this concept of collective action, what does it really mean? And where does it fall within what role does it play with regards to corporate water stewardship?
Sure. So collective action, for those who maybe haven't heard the term, is multiple different stakeholders, often cross-functional, from different organizations, having a dialogue and understanding better what is the shared common water resource that they would like to improve, and identifying specific steps and interventions that they can take to collectively improve that water source. This is a process that is very challenging because it means bringing together different stakeholders that maybe previously do not work together. In some cases, they may be competitors. In other cases, they may have had a difficult relationship working together in the past. But ultimately, this type of dialogue and ultimately action is imperative for companies to be able to actively manage their water risks beyond the fence line. The reason for that being that no company is large enough or powerful enough to completely control the water resources on their own. So this challenge is a legitimate challenge. It's an important challenge to take on. In order to do so effectively, I would strongly encourage companies to consider really sound project management practices, so setting clear, resolute goals and working towards those together, SMART goals, time-bound goals ideally. And it also calls on new financing mechanisms and new ways of understanding impact and measuring and evaluating the impact. And those are areas that South Pole is working on quite a lot at the moment.
Great, thank you, Naomi. And you mentioned earlier that it's almost the best time to get involved in this issue, because for those companies that are perhaps coming to this for the very first time, you're able to learn from the last 5 years of activity that's been already underway, and a lot of tools already exist. So the Alliance for Water Stewardship, which is an international initiative, has established a standard that any company can adopt, and it guides their interventions at a facility level within a river basin to help you pursue stronger corporate water stewardship and collective action. We would certainly advocate for you to go and learn a little bit more about that standard and think through how it will support your business in taking advantage of these opportunities. And speaking of taking advantage, Naomi, what ultimately are the business benefits of taking collective action and pursuing corporate water stewardship?
I think the primary benefit is that it enables a company to move from taking a reactionary stance, so trying to solve a problem once that problem is acute, to taking a more proactive stance. It enables them to understand how future scenarios will look and to react to those before the problem becomes so acute that it's creating a real problem, real challenge within the business. It also enables companies to leverage one another's resources. So in many cases, this can result in cost savings for the company. By working together for a collective goal, you're able to ensure that all the efforts are aligned, moving towards the same goal and ensuring that none of the interventions are maybe canceling one another out or not working towards that same collective goal. So I would strongly encourage companies to move in that direction. Mm-hmm. And I think for those companies who are just starting, it's never too early to start a dialogue. So, begin by starting a dialogue and then move quickly towards action.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Naomi. We undertook some research over the last year with the GIZ, the German Development and Aid Institution. The objective of that was to research into the current barriers to collective actions for companies, whether those barriers existed within the company themselves and also beyond. One of our key findings, and some of the research is described in the Global Water Report this year. We'll release a much more deeper report in the next few months. One of the significant roles that was being called for, of course, was sort of the honest broker. There was a very real recognition that collective action isn't very easy. And there are, of course, many risks for companies going and engaging more broadly with policymakers, regulators, with water utility companies. While it's an important first step, I think you should be aware of some of those risks going into these types of dialogues. And in fact, the UN Global Compact CEO Water Mandate has a range of different guidelines on their website that can help inform and educate you in these matters. So finally, Naomi, I'm personally excited by all of this additional interest in water resources management from investors and from companies. From your perspective, what does this really mean?
Well, first of all, it truly is, I think, a momentous time where we have different stakeholders who are all coming together for the same goal. I think for companies, this has a really positive spin and a very positive opportunity to it as well, because if done correctly, working towards better corporate water stewardship and also collective action can lead to securing their social license to operate. It can enhance business and supply chain resilience, and it can improve brand value for companies. So ultimately, while we're facing challenges as companies, we are also, at the doorstep of great opportunities. And I think the report highlights many of those opportunities that companies have already been able to seize. And I think that we're going to see more and more of them in the future.
Good. I hope so.